welcome Ben Shapiro and Gregory Crewdson to Filmwax Radio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, okay, so just last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to let you two chat it out for the rest of the 20 minutes while I go get a coffee, is that Greg and I went to summer camp, right, back in the late 90s when we were children.
Not only did we go to summer camp, we went to Camp Thoreau, which was this defining experience for, I think, both of us and
absolutely
anyone else who went. It's fantastic.
It's true. I don't.
Place.
When we said hello a few minutes ago, I don't think we couldn't have seen each other for close to 40 years.
Yeah, amazing, and it just feels like yesterday that we were skinny dipping together in
Tushy Rock.
Tushy Rock, yeah.
Ben, you have a question about that? Go ahead and ask.
No, I'm just going to let that blow right by.
Peppermint soap.
Peppermint soap, right? In Tushy Rock. So. Well, while we're on the subject,
that's clearly not in the documentary.
It isn't. I was disappointed. That was the only thing.
There's some of you swimming for about that.
That's true. Yeah.
I do remember from the documentary there was some old clips from the back in the day, going back to your childhood, and you lived upstate.
Right, in Massachusetts, where I make all the pictures now. So.
Oh, was that in Western Mass, not in upstate New York?
That's right.
I know you're from
in the Berkshires.
Very good. And I remember I guess we weren't necessarily close friends, but we did have a few summers there, I guess, right? But the reason I guess I ask is how much did that impact you as deciding to become an artist, in this case, photographer?
Going to...
But even at that kind of summer camp.
Well, I feel like my education in my early years were so defining in terms of who I am now. I went to Brooklyn Friends during the 70s, which was at the height of open education. A consequence of that is that I don't know how to read or write, but
small. I certainly didn't need that at Camp Thoreau, but
right. So it was all very consistent, that period of just like exploration and open education, and certainly Camp Thoreau was like defining on so many different levels, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think shaped me, obviously, in terms of what I do now.
And how did you guys meet up?
We met up because 2000, 2001, around there, I was doing a lot of work shooting and producing documentary pieces for a public television show called Egg about the arts. And they decided they wanted to do a piece about Gregory. Mm-hmm. So they asked me to do that. And I had seen his images before. Mm-hmm. So I knew his work up to that point a little bit. And I went up to Massachusetts and spent a few days filming on one of his sets. That's really how the connection got started.
Well, how long were you familiar with his work?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, I kind of when we were doing research for the piece, we went back and looked at some of his images, and they were familiar. I'd seen them in some. I think that's true of a lot of people that his work has been in. It exists in the cultural zeitgeist, for lack of a better term. So I had seen that. I had seen some of the images.
Mm-hmm. You had done some documentary stuff. You had done some documentary projects for PBS.
Yeah.
Were any of them based on like kind of profiles or on artists? A
number of them. I mean, New York artists and other places. Every wide range of things. Musicians and visual artists, filmmakers.
So it's comfortable.
Yeah, I had done a fair amount of that before.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote that I read recently, where you said that. Let's see, to quote you directly. My pictures are about a search for a perfect moment. To me, the most powerful moment in the whole process is when everything comes together and there's that perfect, beautiful, still moment. And for that instant, my life makes sense. So...
sad, isn't it?
I almost thought I got a tear out of I thought I might get a tear if I read the quote.
Yeah.
Just so. Well, actually, it is a kind of a little bit a sad.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a sadness to that. it doesn't feel sad in the film. I don't
Well,
get
I think I'm not alone in that kind of way of thinking about art in general. It's like, I think the reason that we're artists or filmmakers or writers or musicians is really about a search for meaning. It's about an attempt to make sense of your life, and for me, photography particularly, and I think it has something to do with the stillness and order of like a frozen moment in time, always made sense to me in a way that maybe other narrative forms don't. And so I was always drawn to that, I think. And for me, the entire process of making a picture from beginning to end, the most powerful part is when after all the months of pre-production and production come together for this moment where everything recedes. All the production, all the lights and everything disappear in a way, and you're just have this brief encounter with this thing in front of you, which I find very calming and
centering, maybe.
Yeah, centering.
And did you, when you are on the other side of that, because you've taken the shot, you've composed the shot, and then you have to disassemble the
right. I usually hide at that point.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, the worst part for me is like when we go into a street, into a neighborhood, and like all our like heavy equipment comes in, and we're like closing the street down and inconveniencing people and putting like generators. I always have this like dread of that, and but it's all worth it, because for me, when we create that moment, it's really beautiful.
That's what I'm talking about.
Something always necessarily goes wrong.
Can we have quiet, please?
I don't think there was ever a time where I didn't wake up absolutely feeling sick to my stomach.
Position and hold.
Gregory takes great pains to create these fantastical worlds that are seamlessly real.
Of course, then there's months and months of post-production trying to reclaim that moment in a way, which is impossible.
In terms of the just the mounting,
just like the production, like the post-production of like working digitally, compositing different negatives and trying to make a print that in some way or another is an approximation of what we saw.
It dawns on me that there might be someone who's listening that who might not be familiar with Greg's work, and I guess it's, can you describe what Greg does with his photos?
Well, I mean,
pictures.
someone in the film says this, and I think it's really true, that Laurie Simmons, the photographer, says this, that the key to his work in some sense is cinema, in that he uses at least during the time when the movie focuses on, he was using the apparatus of cinema, of filmmaking, to make still images. There are these large-scale tableau scenes,
right?
Beautifully lit, meticulously crafted, and they're all set in these small towns in western Massachusetts. That, although they're in those towns, they have a look that could be described as being in a lot of American vernacular kind of small towns.
Sure, and they're cast. I mean,
and they're cast. He places figures in them. And most often almost all of them they're just kind of still moments, maybe perhaps reflective moments for the characters that appear in the images.
I suppose anyone who does a portrait spends that kind of time in terms of exactly
right,
just how they're holding their hand on their lap, and I'm wondering, is that just part of that process that you described, that moment?
Yeah, when someone walks on set to be in one of my pictures, there's very little improv. Like, I know the camera is fixed, it doesn't move, all the lighting is set. I know pretty much exactly where that figure is going to stand or sit, and I know the gesture. So all those things are mapped out. The things that I don't know are the very small details of like how she's going to hold her body, or just the slight angle of her face, those are the nuanced things that try to work out on set. But it's minor things. It's the smallest details that, for me, makes a picture work or not. A lot of the pictures in Beneath the Roses are, particularly the location pictures, figures are quite small in the landscape. So it's very much about the relationship between the figures and the setting. And so the setting, the architecture, the cars, the light, the description of the landscape is all as important as the figure itself. It's all these things coming together to create one kind of world.
I think that when I looked at these works, that they were the result of a collection of internal moments that you've sort of stored up.
Yeah.
But are there any artists or works that have especially impressed you, especially for Beneath the Roses?
Yeah, I think my work, I'm very much influenced or shaped by a tradition of art that looks for, it's a particularly American tradition that finds the interzone between ordinary life and theatricality. Mm-hmm. So that tradition of artists that inspire me is wide-ranging, but Edward Hopper, for example, is a central figure, and Walker Evans and Diane Arbus, and certainly Alfred Hitchcock and Steven Spielberg, and of course David Lynch.
Mm-hmm. Two filmmakers that you don't necessarily usually get in the same sense.
Right,
but it's that sense of coming from different sides of, maybe one is like David Lynch might be more of a overtly dark filmmaker.
Right. Or even like...
But they both deal with actually loss and sadness quite a bit.
And they also both deal with people with a lot of characters. Both of them are characters driven by these particular and sometimes peculiar obsessions.
True. Yeah. So that's the and that's the kind of rich tradition that I draw from. Mm-hmm. So the work is partially in response to those influences, and then partially response to the place itself, the landscape, and also my own kind of internal story that is of course central to the whole body of work. It's like, as I've said in the movie, and I strongly believe that every artist has one story to tell, and you sort of tell and retell that story over and over again, in visual form, trying to reinvent that story or challenge it in some ways, but you always come back to the same set of preoccupations or obsessions.
We're speaking with Gregory Crewdson and Ben Shapiro, whose film Gregory Crewdson, Brief Encounters, is about to come out in, at least I know, in New York at the Film Forum on October 31st for 2 weeks, which is no small thing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
We're both excited, I think.
It's a great place.
It's slightly surreal in a certain way for me,
Mm-hmm. I assume you'll be there for opening nights and
I'll be at every performance.
Even the ones like next door where they're probably going to be showing Dial M for Murder in 3D again or something. I don't mean that in a disparaging way. They right. It's a great movie. So Ben, it speaks really well to the success of, I think, the film, or how you successfully worked, where I do get so much a sense of Greg through his artwork. Mm-hmm. Again, there's no mentions of Camp Thoreau. I think you left, maybe in the bonus footage.
In the director's cut.
Oh, in the director's cut, even better.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But what do you owe that to as a storyteller yourself? Like that you sort of, that had to be scary if you didn't get those kind of. If you didn't capture those moments, you might not have had the film, and you followed him around for how many years?
Well, off and on for about 10 years almost.
Right.
And there were some quieter times in there, but that's always the challenge of making documentary films. Is how you get those moments, both in terms of action, things that are happening before the camera, and also in this case, we did interviews, and I mean, Gregory and his voice basically narrate the film, and we were talking about this earlier. That was really the result of many hours of interview, over the years, and so I had this interviews in the sense also it was as much a kind of a body of conversation, so I had this library of conversation and interview to draw from, to use as soundtrack in the movie. But when you're making a documentary, I'm sure there were lots of moments that I missed. Mm-hmm. You hope that
right.
you hope you gather enough of the right kind of ones that allow you to tell the story.
There are a lot of moments that I wish he missed. I'm just kidding.
Are you serious? Are there
I'm just kidding.
anything where? Well, let's get back to that in a
no.
second. Just you have to look through the viewer because I don't know. Yeah, and just take some if you don't mind, guys. Is that okay? Take a few shots. I'm sorry to ask you.
Multitasking.
But you are a publicist.
There were. I'll narrate. We're seeing
Adam. You can talk into the mic if you have any questions.
Adam is here taking photographs.
My friend Adam Walker. Yeah, you can pose us.
No, that's part of
was there anything you were worried, Greg? Was there anything you were worried about? Like maybe that we didn't see much of your current personal life.
The whole proposition is one of at least some concern.
Sure,
to have a movie made about your work in your life over a period of 10 years is like it's an act of trust, I think, on both sides. For Ben to invest this period in his life to do this is an act of trust on his part, and then for me it's also an act of trust to kind of allow him into the whole work, and then trust him to be sort of have discretion, because he had complete control over the film he made. I didn't have any part of it, and in fact I didn't see the film until it was complete. I didn't see any of the footage until it was complete, and that was very necessary. And I have to say that,
and that's something for which I was grateful.
Yeah,
that he had that attitude, and
he gave you carte blanche.
Well, yeah, completely. There's only one time. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's only one time that I remember that he said I couldn't film, and that was because there was one of the subjects of one of the photographs on the soundstage was nude.
I totally regret that now.
And I, it's like you have to be responsive to that.
That's too bad. That's really too bad.
It was the shot in the woman in the mirror in the hotel room.
Right.
And but I understood it then, and because it's like it's your this other person involved, and would they be comfortable being on camera, and would they feel comfortable saying no if they or they would even notice, and so you're just kind of being responsible to the subject, but.
Right, and then in the end. Well, when I saw it for the first time, and I would be lying to if I didn't say that it was like really hard to watch for the first time. Like, it was not because I didn't value it as a movie, but because it's like just to watch yourself over a period of 10 years and know the things you've gone through in your life. And when we set out on this like 10 years ago, neither of us had any inkling of what would happen over the course of 10 years, and that's daunting in a way, but my final, after seeing it a few times now, of course I think it's a really great film, and feel very privileged that it exists. There has always been, while I was making the photographs, this sort of blurring of reality and fiction, using actual places.
That's the abyss right there.
Actual inhabitants of the towns.
Hey, it's Gregory.
To try to draw out something psychological. Oh, it's amazing. Her expression's incredible.
Look at that sky. That's the best sky we've ever had.
To me, the most powerful moment in the whole process is when everything comes together. And for that instance, my life makes sense. It's hard to watch yourself.
Sure.
Just on that basic level.
I don't have that problem, but No, I can relate.
Yeah.
And Ben, I know that it's great to get the good reviews. I mean, it's awesome to get great reviews. It's sometimes the difference between the film having a life.
That is true.
Sometimes
He's
they're-
getting better reviews than I've ever gotten.
and it's great to
That's
get
not
the
true.
accolade. people responding in the crowds and letting.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if there's one thing I'm really touched about, it's people really seem to respond to the film in a way that's, I think, somewhat unusual for like a documentary on
What
an
if
artist.
sort of what's the tenor? What has it been? Has it been more like, wow, I relate to you as an artist, or
I think
relate
something
to
like
you
that.
as
I think
a-
it's like, I think that for whatever reason, like the version he captured of the working process and is remarkably free of like pretension. The movie is, and I think the whole process is, and I think that makes it people respond to it in a way that's in an emotional level. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's owed partly to the fact that I had this unlimited access to Gregory and his process over this period of time while he was creating this body of work. I mean, a lot of films about artists, and I've worked in these kind of projects too. Sometimes it's just inevitable that you're there after the work is done, and so you're with this person and you have the body of work, and I think that inherently kind of is. I mean, it's sort of artificial in a way, but it also puts them in a position of having to be there and kind of be the great person who's done this thing. Whereas this film is more just about somebody. My film is just more about somebody, Gregory, who's just she's working towards trying to do something and to achieve something, and that's something very identifiable about that.
Also, it's like the way I make art is pretty unusual in that this is
Right.
not like an artist in their studio, So it's not like a lone endeavor. We're dealing with like neighborhoods and like,
Oh, right.
and like different.
But you are doing these projects in your backyard in a sense. I mean, the people know you, if not
Right.
personally, they know you.
But there's like there's a larger population outside of just the context of making the work, and I think that's part of the vitality of the film.
Great.
It's finally silent. Now that we're finished with the interview.
I know. Oh my gosh, it's
that ironic? That's sort of like,
But
that's part of how like my pictures go.
oh well.
There's always that chaos in the background.
Well, you guys were really great to be able to sort of be in the interview, be in it, and be in the moment of the interview, considering all the.
Should we do it again?
From the top, right? And the one. So I don't know. This is great. I could have you guys on for another
Let's
half hour, but
great to see you. Next time, let's do it like not every 40 years.
I hope for the option to do it in another 40 years, but that I'll be coherent and upright. But it's Gregory Crewdson, photographer, artist, camp friend,
Bunkmate.
Ben Shapiro, bunkmate. I don't know.
Too much
In the bunk-
information.
in the bunk of that is Filmwax Radio. Oh, geez. Where there is no skinny dipping, or has not been yet, but it's still early. And thank you guys for coming on, and much success with Gregory Crewdson, Brief Encounters.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.